He became known as the man with the donkey and a national hero in a country on the other side of the world. He saved many lives, putting his own life at risk in a remote land in the First World War. He became surrounded by legend, but is largely unknown in this country. He grew up here, in South Shields. This is the story of John Simpson Kirkpatrick. We know quite a lot about Kirkpatrick's life, but there are also a lot of tall tales about him too. But one thing is for sure, he was a true hero, and his story should be remembered. John Simpson Kirkpatrick, or Jack as his family and friends called him, was born here in South Shields in July 1892. He lived with his mum, dad and 3 sisters, and went to school at Mortimer Road School. While on his summer holidays, Jack would work as a donkey lad for Mr. George, giving donkey rides for a penny a time along the South Shields seafront. He used to lead the donkeys right here, along the herd sand. Jack would work long hours with the donkeys and would even ride a donkey home. In 1909, his father died. Within 2 days of the funeral, Jack had left home to start a job in the Merchant Navy. The steady wage Jack sent back would be essential for his family.
Joining the Merchant Navy really did give Kirkpatrick the chance to see the world. He sailed to Africa and the Mediterranean, and to start off with, we know from the letters he sent back home, he had a really good time of it. But after returning home for Christmas, he set sail on a ship called the Yedo.
Unfortunately, the long journey from South Shields to Chile was a very bad one as Jack was concerned. The weather was terrible and the food on board the ship was deplorable. So he thought the life at sea was not for him, and subsequently he jumped ship in Australia.
From Newcastle, he made his way up to Queensland. Then over the next few months worked his way back down the country from Cairns to Sydney, which is over 1,500 miles. That's more than 5 times the distance from South Shields to London in just a few months. And that maybe gives us a good indication of the gumption and stamina which would later make him a hero.
He was under the impression that Australia was a land of milk and honey, and that he could get a job anywhere with good wages and send it home to his mother. Unfortunately, this proved not to be the case. There was a surplus of men at the time, and wages on the mainland were quite low. Subsequently, he found himself in a lot of low-paid jobs. He cut cane in Queensland, he went to a cattle ranch, and then he ended up in the mines of New South Wales. Now, working in a mine in 1910 was not easy. It was hard work, but worse still for Jack, the wages were still very poor. So after 3 months in the mines of New South Wales, he decided to go back to sea. He got a job on what's called a tramp steamer, working as a stoker, calling from port to port along the coastline of Australia.
And then he made the decision that would deliver him to the scene of his heroics.
Kirkpatrick decided that he wanted to come back home again to the UK. He was probably homesick and wanted to see his family. World War I had broken out, and like many others, he decided that the best way to get a ticket back home was to join the army. So he signed up to the Australian Imperial Force in Perth under the name John Simpson, no doubt to ensure that his previous desertion from the Merchant Navy went undetected by the authorities. Jack's plan was probably to come back home, see his family, and then head off to the front to do his bit for the war. But the war was coming to him sooner than he expected.
While the ships were leaving and en route to England, carrying the Australian troops, Turkey entered the war on Germany's side, and it was decided that the Australians and New Zealanders should go to Egypt to do the training. Jack was furious. He wrote to his mother and he said in a letter, "If I had have known I would be sent to this God-forsaken place, I would never have joined the contingent. I would have worked my ticket home and then joined up when I got home to South Shields." So on the 25th of April 1915, the Anzacs, Australian and New Zealand troops, took part in the Gallipoli landings, an attempt to knock Germany's ally, Turkey, out of the war.
Many hundreds of soldiers fought there from all over the Commonwealth, including the Anzac forces of Australia and New Zealand, and including John Simpson Kirkpatrick. And this is where this amazing true story of extraordinary bravery really starts.
Jack was a well-built young lad and so was selected to be a stretcher bearer. Now, the stretcher bearer's task during the fighting was as dangerous as any other soldier. They had to enter the battlefield to retrieve those who lay injured and return them safely to the field hospital, whilst often being under heavy fire from the enemy themselves. It was dangerous work, but it didn't seem to faze Jack.
It was said that he would walk across the battlefield and go about his business unconcerned with the deadly shrapnel and bullets flying all around him, even whistling and singing as he did, leaving the troops in the trenches, as you can imagine, spellbound. They landed and went straight into battle against a Turkish force that was frankly much more resilient than they expected. The first day on Gallipoli was hard and dangerous work, and it didn't look like getting any easier in the days to come. On the second day of the battle, as he was climbing up the hill to bring back another wounded soldier, Kirkpatrick spotted something. Donkeys had been used by the Greeks to carry water and fuel for the troops, and one stood right there next to the wounded man he was about to save, giving young Jack an idea.
John Simpson Kirkpatrick saw the donkey and remembered his time back home at South Shields, where he would give donkey rides along the beach. He lifted the injured man onto the donkey's back and took him to the dressing station to have his wounds seen to. Kirkpatrick and his donkey went back up the hill time and time again, rescuing twice as many soldiers as he could have done alone. At the end of the day, Kirkpatrick refused to go back to his own unit and continued to help bring back more wounded soldiers. He could have got into serious trouble, but when the men in charge found out, they gave him permission to continue, as he was a special case. John Simpson Kirkpatrick calmly and cheerfully continued to save dozens and dozens of injured soldiers while under heavy enemy fire over the next 24 days, becoming famous with the troops. Sadly though, on May the 19th, 1915, at the age of just 22, he was shot and killed, doing what he's now become famous for, carrying a casualty away from the front on the back of a donkey. He was buried on the beach. Since that day, tales have been told of the man with the donkey and his great bravery. Often truth and legend are mixed together. In his hometown, Kirkpatrick is a local hero. A statue of him, with his donkey, stands on the main street, and there's a display in the local museum. But beyond South Shields, in the country that he called home, those who know his story are few and far between. But the remarkable actions of the man with his donkey were so greatly admired by those who served with him that to this day he's a national hero in Australia, and his story of self-sacrifice for his comrades is taught in schools across the country. An army officer on the beaches of Gallipoli said that Kirkpatrick was worth 100 men. But it was on the beaches of South Shields that he learned the skills that, together with his character and courage, made him a hero.
Well, being in the town, there's the statue and people talk about him. I think there's a pub named after him. I think it's important that the children learn about the history of their local area as well. And it gives some meaning as to who he was and what he did. And being he's celebrated in Australia, it's really important, I think, that the children of our town here know about him.
It's really just far too young to die. And because he died while saving a casualty, so it's a bit unfair.
A brave man, because not many people would go onto the battlefield and do that.
So we should always remember him and keep, like Anzac Day, keep on going, so like never stop Anzac Day.
I thought he was a really brave person for what he did and saved all them people's lives because they could have died.
And he was very kind because he thought of other people before himself.
He's definitely very life-risking because he could have died at any minute on the battlefield, but he kept going just for them people. Brave.
And he was kind to put his life on the line for other people.
They really enjoyed it. They enjoyed taking part as well. They were asked to lead a memorial service on Anzac Day where they went to the Kirkpatrick statue and laid a wreath. They did some readings and they really enjoyed that as well, and knowing the reasoning behind why they were doing that.
There was a great oversight that he wasn't awarded the VC. I think there's a great oversight that whilst he was put forward for a commendation, it never came to fruition. I don't know whether that was because he was obviously killed in action, and the aftermath of of the campaign. I still think that he was a tremendously brave man, and I'm proud to say that he was a son of South Shields.
I think it's really amazing that we could be standing in the place that he's once walked in. He's just amazing.
Because he's a local hero now.